Now let's look at Terraform profiles and files. Assuming that you're managing different projects in the production environment, in the testing environment, and maybe in the staging environment. Now, you want to provision resources in the production environment only, or you want to provision resources in the testing environment only, or you want to provision resources in the staging environment only, you make use of Terraform profiles. So profiles enable you to logically separate different environments, right? So with profiles, you can logically separate your environment. Assuming you have a production environment, you can create EC2 instances only in the prod environment. You can create S3 buckets only in the prod environment. You can create relational databases only in the prod environment. You can even create a CI, a code pipeline only in the prod environment. Now, the same thing, if you have resources that you want to provision in the testing environment, you can have an EKS cluster in a Lambda environment. You can have a Lambda function in the prod or in the testing environment. So profiles help you to logically separate environments. Now for Terraform files, assume you have a lot of configuration files that you actually want to separate, or the moment you start producing resources in a very big scale, you'll be having some different components in your Terraform resource, in your Terraform folder. So for you to logically manage resources, you can always group them in files, and you can have your main .terraform file. You can have a file just for your variables, which you call a variables.terraform file. You can have a file just for the outputs, which you call output.terraform file. So you use these files to effectively manage different resources. So in your main.terraform, all your configuration of resources will be in your main.terraform. Now in your variables.terraform file, all your variables will be in your variable.terraform file. Now in your output.terraform, all the outputs of Terraform will be in your output.terraform file. So this is how you logically separate your resources, or this is how you logically separate the codes that you're writing in Terraform into files. So you come to the main.terraform file, you find only resources that are being created. You come to the variables.terraform file, you find the variables that are being created, and then you come to the output.terraform file, you see the outputs that you require doing your Terraform. So let's go into our Terraform to see how we can create our Terraform profiles and Terraform configuration files. Now you come back to VS Code. Let's close the terminal. We are going to copy the first folder we had was creating EC2. Let's create a new folder. Make sure the folder one is not highlighted. Click out of that. So if you click out of this, you create a new folder. So you can call it 2 testing. 2 is profiles and files. Profiles and different files. Once you create the profiles and different files, you come here, you create a new file, you call it your main.terraform file. You hit enter. You come back to folder 1, you click on your main.terraform, you copy all of this configuration file, copy that, and then you paste it in the main.terraform in folder 2. Now, what do you want to do? You want to make now use of profiles. If you open your terminal, you open terminal, for you to see the available profiles in your environment, you do AWS configure, then you list profiles in your environment. So once you do AWS configure list profiles, you see we have a profile default at default profile. We have the EKS profile. It means that resources will be created only in the default profile. With EKS CTL, it means resources will be created in the EKS CTL profile. So for you to create a new profile, let's create a profile for our production environment, for our staging environment, and for our test environment. So for us to create a profile for the production environment, we do AWS configure profile, and then we give the profile name testing environment and you hit enter. Now, once you create a profile, you must specify the secret and access key that you want to use in that given profile. That basically means that you are specifying which user will have access to that profile. And for you to get which user can have access to that profile, you come back to IAM, you open IAM, you select, you go to users, you select your user, you click on security credentials, and then you make use of the access keys. So these are different access keys. This access key was created. I don't have access to the key, so I'll disable this. Let me deactivate the key, and then you delete the key if you don't have access to the key. Start by the access key. You input your access key, and then you put in your secret access key. You specify the region US West 2, and then you give the default format, which is JSON. So once you do that, you've configured your secret access key and you've configured a new profile. Again, for us to see profiles, AWS configure list profiles is going out to show us we have now a new profile, default EKSCTL and the EKSCTL and the testing environment. For us to add this profile in our Terraform configuration file by specifying which profile we want to use to create our resources, in your provider block, you create a new line and you use the command and input profiles. And once you click on profile, you now specify which profile you want to use to create your resources. And we are now going to create our resources in the testing profile because we have confirmed that we have the testing profile in our environment. It means that all the resources that will be created by this Terraform template will be created in the testing environment profile. And with this, you've actually added profiles into your Terraform configuration file. Now, for us to go into separate files, you can now create a different file. Remember we are in the folder, we are in folder 2. We have our main.terraform, which consists of all these files which we already created in our first module. Now, for us to create a separate file, we click on new, and we give the file name provider.terraform. Now, once you do provider.terraform, you see it's an empty file. For you to add provider information, you come back to your main.terraform and you copy all of these provider files, you right click, you cut, and then you come back to your provider.terraform and you paste. Now, once you paste this, you now see that we have two configuration files. The first configuration file we have is a file that specifies just the provider. That means every time you want to modify or do changes related to the provider, you come to the provider.terraform file. Now, the main.terraform file contains just the resources, and the first resource we have here is the AWS instance. So with you taking the main file which was in the first folder, if you come back to our first folder here, you see our main.terraform. Our main.terraform had files in different, we had our provider and our resources in the same file. But once you break these files with respect to their use cases, you come now to folder 2 and you see that in our main.terraform we have just the resources, and then we now have a provider.terraform to specify all our provider related configurations, and with the main.terraform we specify all our main related configurations. So as you've provided this into two separate files, you can still go ahead to run your Terraform init just to initialize. Okay, show there are no configuration files in the Terraform folder, so we have to cd into the folder 2 where we have our configurations files. So let's clear this. Let's do an ls. You see we have the first folder which is creating EC2, but we don't want to do Terraform apply in that folder. We are going to cd into the second folder, which is the folder for profiles and different files. So let's cd into that. So cd to profiles, and then do an ls. You now see we have a main.terraform file and a provider.terraform file. If you were to go back to the previous folder we had and you do an ls and you cd into folder 1 and you do an ls, you see that we have just the main.terraform, while in the different files folder we have main.terraform and provider.terraform. So let's clear this. Let's cd again back to our parent directory, and then we cd into the two Terraform with profiles. Once cd into two Terraform with profiles, you can now do Terraform init because there is no configuration file, and it's going to reinitialize Terraform in this new folder which you created. So you wait for Terraform init to complete, and when Terraform init complete, you can run Terraform plan, Terraform apply, and Terraform destroy. So basically, you should understand how to create all your resources in your main.terraform file, and how to use a provider file to list and to enumerate resources with respect to providers.